today we are bringing to you an episode that is very special. We are bringing one of our own into the episode where we could explore his mind and understand more about his path to success, specifically in the business world. I've had a personal relationship with this person for a long time now, literally almost a decade or right around then. And I see him as a brother. Some people think he is my real brother because we look alike, apparently. And we have had many, many experiences together as a group with this individual. He's near and dear to our heart. And we've been able to see him go from a college student to an amazing person in the business world who manages and helps people guide them through their path of success in the business world as a whole. He is an amazing person. He is a great husband and an amazing friend. So welcome, Jonathan Strahl.
Don't forget Fur Dad. He's an amazing Fur Dad.
Oh, he is a Fur Dad.
Fur Dad. Recent Fur Dad. Kind of recent.
Recent Fur Dad, yeah.
Thanks for having me, gents. Appreciate it. Great introduction. Thanks, Kenny.
I want to get started on a just kind of understanding from where you were many years ago coming into college. I think the first time I ever heard of political science was from you. So I had no idea what that was prior to knowing you. And then I had the fortune of seeing you go through that and kind of change your path through college, really. That has now led you into the tech world, and we've seen you go through changes. So the one thing that I want to kind of start off with and lay the foundation for our conversation today is, what industry are you in? What do you do in the business world? And how did you get there? Because I've seen you personally, or we've all seen you personally, kind of change and shift and maneuver different positions. So can you lay that foundation for us?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's always a fun question, right? So I clearly, as you mentioned, I work in the technology consulting space. Essentially what I do is help technology groups strategize and create ways to navigate in the crazy chaos technology driven world that we're living in, which is very exciting. So at the end of the day, helping create customer experience goals, tapping into technology trends that are going to either save money, make money, or mitigate risks in the short sense, right? Was not technical. Like to think I'm sometimes technical, but I'm nowhere close to the experts and the wonderful people I work with on a daily basis. But it's been quite the journey. It's crazy to say it's almost been a decade of working in this industry, and you're always learning something new every single day. And for that, I'm very appreciative, but also I have the opportunity to work with even more amazing people just in the industry.
Awesome. I think that one thing I want to kind of ask on top of that is, has your background or your understanding in college and what you studied in college, has that helped shape where you are today or the role that you're in?
Yeah. So let me give you a little bit of context or background just to how I even found myself in areas where maybe I flourish or do well, and areas where I've struggled and had to learn, right? It's interesting, right? You always read these books or articles, you can listen online. It's like, follow your passion, follow what your interest is in, and go reach for the stars. And for those that are watching this or listening in, like, I encourage you to do that. Please do that. I think in the day and life we live in, you'd rather try to reach those goals, reach those aspirations, follow your dream, because you never want to finish in life saying I shoulda, coulda, woulda. So please follow that. Do whatever makes you happy and passionate, because you can always fall back on it or fall back on a second plan if anything changes. Now, context, we all met at Stetson, right? We all graduated. We all went to Stetson, more or less. Football brought us there. And then there's academics, right? And you mentioned and hinted at it. I was going to go the political science route. Really quickly realized that is not the route for me. I wanted to go more into law school. After speaking with professors, colleagues, some mentors, our coaches, essentially they were like, hey, just change the degree and obviously do what you're kind of interested in. So I always thought I was going to go to the sports route. I think all of you know our senior year, I kind of distanced myself. There was a lot of discovery of, what the heck am I going to do? And, the trials and tribulations with football, the love was still there, but I knew I wasn't going to be the next Tim Tebow, Johnny Manziel, whatever it was at the NFL. So I kind of just wanted to take a risk. And I could have taken the safe route and went to, your traditional sales and selling tickets for a single A baseball team. And those were a lot of the routes and angles I was pretty much going to approach. But I was like, hey, I'm young, talked with a lot of individuals. What do you want to do? Well, I landed on three things and how I approached it. And it was, I couldn't sit behind a desk and just literally punch numbers or look at data or just do things that weren't necessarily chasing something, right? I had to have an environment where there's a competitive spirit, where I can communicate skills and go out there and do things and try to find solutions, right? And then the second was like the career development versus growth, which I think are very different. But I wanted to find an opportunity that could provide that, especially I'm getting out of college, don't know what I want to do. And then the last thing was, what industries in 10 years is there a disruption? And it's not going to go anywhere. And I landed on three. It was medical, which didn't want to be part of that, to be honest. Sports, wanted to phase out, and then technology. So here we are today. What I will say, my background in college at one way, shape, or form did help influence the way you communicate, with individuals. Your listening skills, all those great, maybe non-traditional or traditional, whatever you want to call it. Things were definitely helped and advanced in college, but from the tech stack and from what I've learned, I'm extremely thankful because the company I work for and started with, they invest a lot of time, energy, and effort. And, it's a lot of us don't get a degree, or we do get a degree and we don't land up with that degree and doing what we're doing future state, which I think that's pretty much a testimony to all of us on this call.
Yeah, very fair to say. You mentioned your organization, and we've seen you in different types of leadership roles and other capacities and other organizations that we've all been a part of together, whether that be athletics or extracurricular activities. But even today, in your role within your organization, within your company, you've been able to achieve that leadership role. Can you talk about your ascension towards that leadership role and kind of where that's placed you, and also the shift that's taken from a personal perspective, from going to kind of just entering a position to now having to worry about others more on a consistent basis?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, and we'll probably talk about this future state, but, at the time and growing into leadership roles, especially in college, like, the effort, the want to be involved, and the commitment kind of is half the battle of finding your way in those types of leadership opportunities, right? So there's always a focus on, hey, I want to be within an organization to maybe grow, right? But what the biggest piece was the development within the career and them shaping you the way you would like to know in order to really lead someone. So for me, when I think about leadership and just the career growth piece and having to play both roles where you're expected to produce and expected to obviously lead people and making sure they're seeing success and they're doing the things that are going to make them win in the long run. That's what gets me going. That's what, makes me come to work. Right. I think anybody who has the opportunity to impact others, you find out it's always about the people. Right. And if those people are around you and you're doing the right practices and addressing things that can only help them elevate in their role, good things will come. Now, it's the delegation piece of how do you delegate X amount of time to being a producer, growing, obviously being in a sales environment. That's one thing, but then helping those that you're working with or reporting to you, for however you want to call it, they're hitting their quotas and the expectations. it's something that's a thrill, honestly, and it's an opportunity that I've always wanted. So again, it's an exciting opportunity where I'm at in my career today.
You know, I remember back in the day when you actually were going through the interview process, and I remember how cutthroat that interview process. I think it was like 3 or 4 rounds,
Mm-hmm.
And it sounded very intriguing. Especially as all of us were going through interview processes at the time. And this was before even Kenny had aspirations to become an entrepreneur. And you take a leap and you get the job, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now you're in a whole new environment, right? And you talk about growth and development. Kind of my question to you is how did you essentially, I'm going to use a term, fail forward to make sure that you continue that growth, and then take those fail forward moments and coach up your team members, whether they're lateral to you or under you, to help them essentially make the same mistakes, but then learn from them and grow in their career, thus bringing forward a more profitable company and team and all that kind of stuff.
Great questions. So I'll say this: when you look at what the concept of your question was, failing forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's you look at it this way: it's like, how are you emphasizing the learning from the mistakes or setbacks that happen, right? And rather viewing them, quote unquote, and I share this with individuals, I share this with the team, I share this with myself internally. It's stop looking them at so much as failures, and then how can you turn those missteps, right, into growth and just success future state. I feel like probably everyone's heard this before, but I tie it into 4 F's. It's fail fast and fail forward, right? And then I tie, big acronym guy, 3 E's here. And it's really living by just embrace risk taking. So when I say embrace risk taking, it's okay, if there's education and an analyzed thought process of taking that risk. I can tell you a leader, someone that's in your role, someone that you worked with before, whether it be in life or in your career work environment, they probably made some similar mistakes. And it's how can you actually bounce back and learn from that. The second is just embrace your imperfections. Like, give up the obsessive need to be perfect, right? And just get out there and do what you think may be right. And again, it's okay to fail, but what are you learning in the moment, right? And then lastly, like, this is my biggest thing I think I've learned over the years is you just got to embrace a growth mindset, right? And if you truthfully have a growth mindset and cultivate a mindset where if you have a setback, how am I going to seize that opportunity if it's ever presented to me again? Or what did I do to learn from that? When it comes to the failing forward piece, though, as a whole, and how do you practice it every day, and how do you communicate with your team? It's just really kind of going back to the basics. Like, I am never going to be someone that's disappointed, or I'm never going to ask someone to do something that I don't feel comfortable or that I've never done before either. And you know what? A lot of those trials and tribulations were because I failed and I learned from it. And it's all coming down to trust, right? So if you can create an environment where if you're leading someone and they can kind of understand where you're coming from, I think you can have a high performing team.
Just to kind of cap off the fail forward portion from a management perspective, I'm interested to hear your thought process when you have a team member that failed and have that, even though they have that growth mindset, but they don't know what they did wrong, or what's the learning point that they should get from this. How do you go about, I guess, not necessarily, do you directly tell them, hey, this is where you messed up, or do you try to get them to realize the problem and kind of figure it out themselves? Like, what's your approach on that?
So this is a very interesting and great question. And here's my leadership style, or what I try to do is I try to understand before, even if it gets to that point, hopefully, where I understand how they take feedback. Like, what is the best way to communicate with that person? Because I'll tell you this, there's some people that are like, yo, just hit me straight. Then there's some individuals where we have this saying, you got to use the sandwich effect. Like you give them the good, then you give them the middle. It's like, this is what kind of went wrong and how can you improve? And then, hey, end it with like a little bit better news, right? That's the ideal situation where you have a relationship where you understand what they want and how they want to be led or provided feedback. We love that word, feedback, right? I will say this, my goal is to never give you the answer, right? I always want to take a consultative approach and understand the thought process behind why the decision was made to do whatever it was. And then it's talking through, and it's never I got you moment. And I think that's one thing that's very important is you never want to treat it like a, hey, I got you moment. And the biggest thing is ensuring, hey, I'm not mad. I'm not upset. What's most important is what are we learning from this? How are we moving forward? And then obviously just creating that environment where hopefully there's a success transition from that moment.
I'm going to key in on that word transition that you just used. But before I do that, Johnny, just to kind of paint the picture for everyone, would you mind just sharing with us in your current role, how many individuals are you leading? Are you currently overseeing?
Yeah, so it's interesting. You know, we have our own, we talk about the word transformation, right? Where I think every company out there is going through this crazy transformation. And that's something internally we're going through as well. I think directly, indirectly, we call it a stretch assignment. You know, I've had the opportunity to lead anywhere from 5 to 7. And then obviously just have an opportunity to be the emphasis or the voice for certain divisions or verticals, which is very exciting, which I'm extremely thankful. But with that, there's a lot of learning. So yeah, I would say give or take, you know, roughly the 3 to 5 window is what we like to be comfortable at. And that's typically what we would consider, but it can sometimes be more.
And in your current role, correct me if I'm wrong here, I could be a little bit off. Like, aren't you in charge of a location where you're almost overseeing? Like, I feel like when you told me it was like upwards of 50 or more individuals that like you were responsible for in one form or another. Is that accurate with that statement?
So we have field offices, right?
Right.
Where, you know, depending on how many, you know, reps or sales individuals or on our delivery team, you know, that office could consist of anywhere from 20 to 30 people.
Okay.
It depends on the market, depends on the area, depends on the region. And then, you know, we're also aligned vertically and divisionally, where what that means in layman's terms is essentially how are we supporting groups within a specific industry from a, hey, let's call it media and entertainment, and then at the core application standpoint, which that can grow up to, you know, another between talent delivery and then also your sales, your account managers, etc. You know, can easily go above 50. So, again, there's a lot of transformation, which is exciting because it's at the end of the day, and you guys can all understand this. It's how can you best support your customer and helping them, right? And internally, that's what our main goal is. And since the pandemic, it's been a constant, you know, don't want to say change, but constant, hey, let's rethink the strategy around the best way to support that end client.
And I ask that because, right, you know, if you're someone, whether you have influence, impact in some form or fashion, you know, upwards of 50 or more people, as you've mentioned, maybe not directly, but in some form or fashion. You're recently 31 years old. Happy birthday there. But I want to talk about like the biggest thing I think as a young leader in corporate America, and the biggest challenge that we face all the times is just tenure and experience. Like you have to go through those trials and tribulations. You have to be in role just a certain amount of time to go through that. And you found a way to kind of break through and speed up that process in a sense. So what's one piece of career advice that's helped transform your perspective and really aid you on that journey as you've moved through leadership?
Well, Um, Love that. Thank you for teeing me up and making me feel so important. I think here I'll say this out loud, and I think it's important to set the understanding here. It's like I struggled a lot.
Sure.
There was a lot of questioning whether or not this was the right opportunity for me, and the reason why is because I found out very early. It doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter what you put up on the scoreboard, the talent you had. College is college. You're coming in and you're dealing with great people that know what they're doing, and you're dealing with an industry and an organization where there's people just as hungry as you. So your work ethic and your passion and your grit doesn't necessarily mean much unless you're quote unquote, obviously, how are you growing? How are you helping customers? What's your impact from a leadership standpoint and also externally with the customer? And a lot of that came because for once it was like hard work and just grit just didn't matter. I became uncoachable. And those are things that like it was never unlike myself. Like I was always coached. We were always coached. We grew up coached, right? Playing sports, like you have to be able to be coached to get somewhat good, right? And it was because I was just having a rut and got a lot of feedback, learned a lot. A lot of great mentors, a lot of great people surrounded themselves around me, didn't push me off, invested a lot of time and energy. And I learned, right? Came coachable, focused on the things that great people were doing, learned where my gaps were. So I think to answer your question as a whole, from a career advice that transformed my perspective. So a mentor, and this is a book that probably many people have read. You've probably read it. Someone on this meetings read it. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, right? So I think the main quote and what I'm trying to remember is you can essentially make more friends if you become interested in them versus trying to go out there and make people become interested in you. And I tie this into you need to be maniacal about building meaningful relationships. And when I say meaningful relationships, that could be externally or internally. That could be career driven. That could be personal driven. And a meaningful relationship is not so much getting caught up in the numbers and the targets and what you're trying to hit from a milestone or goal for yourself, but it's genuinely understanding and connecting with people, both personally and professionally. And the business and the outcomes and the deliverables will come with that. Building meaningful connections with people internally has changed my life. I would not be where I am today. I would not be half the person I am today. I would not be the husband, the future father I want to be, right? I would not be the friend I am today if it wasn't for building and really trusting those relationships out there.
Good way to put it. I think that with understanding people and continuing to understand yourself and evolving through just life's course and continuing to advance your career, I think that you experience things and you start to understand how to perform particular activities. One thing that I'm really big on is creating habits, right? Especially in an environment where habits are difficult to create, right? People want to get away from habits a lot of the times, but there's habits that can be created that are good. And there's techniques that are good and strong and powerful. Now, we always hear of the word like work smarter, not harder. What is one way that, or one habit that you swear by that really lives by that term, like work smarter, that you feel is really crucial to the workforce or just work in general that can advance someone's career?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. And I think working smarter is something I struggled with early on, right? And you kind of hit it, right? It's like work harder. You work hard, things should come with it, but that's not always necessarily the case. There's so many hours in the day, right? You got 24 hours, 8 hours, you're quote unquote sleeping. You're at the gym, driving this and that, 2, 3 hours, like all together. You're working. You're spending time with family, friends, your dog, your children, like whatever, right? One thing that I've found very valuable, and this is maybe not the best example, but it's an example that's relevant that's coming to mind. I talked to someone about this a few weeks ago, is being naturally curious with like continuous learning. So when I say that, like you can literally be naturally curious about anything, right? However, if you're naturally curious about something in your industry, it's only going to come more natural to want to look or research or dive into a little bit more future state or at the end of the day. Or when you pick up a book, is it something relevant that is dedicated to learning or enhancing the ability for you to show up to a customer better? Is it understanding the evolving industry trends that are happening every single day? And that's something where it's like, okay, if I could spend an hour almost doing something I actually enjoy and like, but it's actually helping me further my understanding and development within what I do for an occupation, like it's a no-brainer. So if you can actually find something and really focus in that area, in that aspect, it's only going to benefit you. And it quote unquote doesn't necessarily make it feel like you're working, right? We can go on YouTube. I have zero idea how to develop, right? But if I go on YouTube and understand, hey, how does this framework work? What is an API? What does this do? How does that impact X, Y, and Z? But it's doing it from a standpoint of like you're just naturally curious about it. And then you're able to kind of speak the lingo. It only makes you sound more of like a business professional. So staying up to date with the latest trends, methodologies, it's just be smart about it, right? And that's something I try to dedicate at least an hour a day. And if it's during business hours and it's relevant, who's to say that's not work? Because it really is.
Sure, I agree.
You know, I've gotten to like as a former roommate of yours, I got to kind of see you grow and kind of go through this journey firsthand in some ways. And it, it was fun to watch. I have to be honest. Like I know how much nerves you had in the beginning where you're like, oh shit, what the hell is all this crap? What am I getting myself into? And then you were having your troubles, as you kind of talked about before. But then I also saw you change, as you kind of mentioned, like you wouldn't be the friend that you are today. You wouldn't be the husband that you are today. I've seen the growth that's come with what work's actually brought into your life. Definitely a different person than who you were when we were in college. I mean, still the fun, same old Johnny, but there's a little bit more to Jonathan, as Ryan would like to say, than meets the eye. And from an outside looking in, I'd say I've seen you kind of hit multiple successes, right? Like I've seen you move throughout your company, changing to different areas and different. I think you use the term verticals. I don't know if that's the right industry term here. But I kind of want to understand, like, even with contests, right? Like these are metrics that you have to kind of formulate. Well, I've achieved success, but like in the grand scheme of things, what does success actually mean to you as you've gone through this journey in the workforce and with your company and how you've developed over time?
Yeah, I think if you were to ask me this question maybe 5 years ago, um, it was about hitting sales quota, achieving
Mm-hmm.
goals, very specific, right? X amount of money, this, that, reaching milestones, which are all very important, right? Um, but over time, you understand that really the purpose and the why changes. And I think someone who's really invested in growth, not only myself, but also in others, like you start to realize like what matters most. And I think it's the direct impact on, what success means to you. And I always tie it back to the people. Um, And I say that in a professional sense, but it's also in a personal standpoint. Success, it's a journey, right? Like, it's not a destination. I feel like sometimes people have this persona like you're going to get to the destination and it's done, right? No, like, it's always a journey.
The bender continues.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
If you will.
Very
And
nice.
yeah, and don't get me
Sorry for
no,
ruining your train of thought.
no, it's good. I mean, the bender continues for sure.
Hey.
And it always goes back to me like it's going back to the meaningful relationships piece and positively having a legacy. And you talk about continuous growth, self-development myself. How can I be better in all facets of life? Which we'll get into future state, which I know we're very excited. Overall impact and just the fulfillment piece. Like, business wise, hey, I want to be able to help a client achieve what it is that they're looking to do. And if they can do that, love it. That makes me extremely happy. Empower colleagues, help them get to their full potential. Help you all be better, have an impact in a positive manner for each of us, right? And at the end of the day, like, when the chapter of life comes to an end, it's like you can do and say all the things you want, but it's always about what people say about you. And I think that's what's most important. And I would like to think that when it's all said and done, like John was his authentic self. He was transparent, also came with empathy, but at the end of the day, you could count on him, whether it be for advice, whether it be for help, whether just for being a good individual that's trying to help you out. And I think if you're doing the right things, part of this journey, that'll come. But yeah, and it's always going to change, right? Kids, your husband, you want to be great at those. I think sometimes work comes third, right? But that's what I look at and how I define success to this date right now.
It's nice that you've evolved from what probably most people out of college start off with, and it's monetarily driven, right?
Yeah, of course.
You have the goals and you want to reach those successes, and now you're basically investing in the people and yourself.
Yeah,
it's fantastic to see, and it's just been awesome to watch from the outside looking in, Johnny.
Appreciate that.
Well, John, you stole my second question, which was a book or resource that's transformed you, because you kind of hit on that already. So I'm gonna go off the path a little bit here. Something you actually said to me within the last week, because it stuck with me a little bit. You made a comment that you demand excellence from your team, and I think that's a very fair comment to say, and I think the proof is in the pudding from what we've talked about thus far. My question for you is, we're in an environment, we're in a culture where I feel like that's not as easy said. It's not as easy said to be done, basically, because while it's very, we all want to demand excellence, but it's hard to communicate that, right? So how do you kind of navigate the environment we're in, socially, from a work standpoint, where you want to be cut and dry and, hey, black and white, demand excellence, like we are going to be above the standard, but at the same time, you can't be as direct. And I know you mentioned, sometimes it's down to the individual, but I do think that there's some contradictory there. It's contradicting where on the one hand, we're going to expect the best and even more so, but on the other hand, you can't always be that direct in communication of it. So how have you navigated those waters? Because as a fellow people leader, I've struggled with that myself. And I think that's why, when you made that comment last week, it's just resonated with me a little bit. So I'd love for you to be able to maybe share it with us and anyone else listening.
Okay. I would say this. So funny enough, I think I'm sure you guys all have read the book. It's a pretty fairly easy read, and that's why I like the book. The Energy Bus by John Gordon. Right? There's so many sales books out there. There's so many leadership books out there, like self development. There's just so much out there, right? I'm really looking at the bookshelf, and it's like start with why, never split the difference, like how to win friends and influence people. What that book did, it's very simple. Essentially, it's you're the driver, right? You're either in or you're out in a way. And there's a lot of variables and a lot of factors that you can control. And when I talk about the demand for excellence, I try to make it so simple. And the three things I look at is attitude, effort, and care. And if you have the right attitude, the right amount of effort, and you actually care, you'll probably be pretty good at what you do. And you can control all those. Right? It's that simple. Attitude. I've struggled with this. Sometimes you're having a bad day. Ryan, I'm sure, like you mentioned, as you lead somebody, you can't show that attitude. You can't mob. You can't kind of let that attitude or the things that are going down in your world lean on others or impact others. You can control your attitude. Care. I think you truthfully have to care about what you're doing. And if you care, I mean, it's pretty important, right? And then just the effort piece. I mean, give the effort to want to understand and want to learn and want to be great, good things will come. So if you put it that way, attitude, effort, and care, that's the way I lead. That's my mentality. And it's three simple things that you, three on this call, could all control.
I appreciate that because, I think it's when you hear that, right, without the explanation, maybe you tie it to metrics, maybe you can tie it to so many different things. But as you just broke it down so simply for us, it's all on that individual that you're talking to. And like you said, I believe, if you thoroughly care about something, you probably are going to put forth the most amount of effort possible because you care. And then it ties into, I'm already blanking on the third thing. Can you remind me?
Attitude,
effort,
the attitude.
Effort.
And it all ties and it's all within your control. And at the end of the day, there's only one person to look in the mirror for those three specific topics. So,
yeah. Again, listen, it's important to understand everybody's going through things, right?
Sure.
But you said metric, right? You have the right care to hit that metric.
Yeah.
If the attitude is appropriate to what that metric looks like, and do you care enough, right? And it's not even so much about hitting a metric. It's like, what's the reason behind the metric, which I think as a leader, it's important to validate and to appropriately help your team understand what that metric is there for, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's just three things that you can control, and it's that. And I've realized, like, especially with different, generations in the workforce, in the workplace, like there's the things that like you can control. And if you can control those things, I'm going to be able to fight with you. I'm going to be able to try to do whatever I can do to help you. And I'm going to have a significant more conviction to help champion for you for whatever it is you see future sight, whether it be internally with our organization, whether it be elsewhere. That's what it's all about. It's how can I help champion someone?
I have a quick follow-up question on the care, attitude, and effort. And in your scenario, you talk about you're driving the bus, right? And you're either on or you're not. Have you come across the situations where maybe there was attitude, care, and effort, but it just it's not working out well? Do you put the extra time, effort, attitude, and care into that person, or at what point do they have to get off the bus? How do you handle those situations? I mean, you say you want to champion them, and I feel like you like a good underdog story too, right?
Too.
So you could be really invested in them, but at some point, shit or get off the pot. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm curious.
So there's been multiple instances, right? And I think you all have probably had these challenges in a way also. I can tell you this, like I root for people who are maybe underperforming or not succeeding or not hitting the ground running like maybe we want them to or the company expects them to. And that sometimes has been a challenge for my leadership style. I've been provided feedback where it's like, hey, you got to kind of get a little bit more, not harsh, but you got to set expectations. But I firmly believe if those three things are there, there's some shape, some way, somehow you could potentially help that person see success. Now, listen, as an individual who's expected to lead and develop and help, if you've explored every avenue, you've done truthfully what it takes to try to get that person up to speed, there needs to be a mutual connection where it's like, hey, this just isn't for me. But we've exhausted all options. I'll never and say bye-bye. Like that's just not my mentality. That's not my style. And a little bit of that is because I think there's a lot of people we've seen succeed and they didn't maybe hit the ground running or they didn't do what was asked or hit the expectation that was needed. And especially in a sales environment, like it's a very sometimes cutthroat industry. But I think the organization I work with and the culture we've built, that's not our philosophy. And sometimes it's very beneficial and it works out. And then sometimes that individual later decides to walk away or it didn't work for both parties. So, yeah, the underdog piece is for sure something that really resonates now that you say it because it's the truth.
I mean, now you have that underdog, but you also have a high performer on your team too. Do you have that conundrum of, am I putting too much effort towards an underdog where if I put more effort towards the high performer and they can double X their output? I mean, where do you kind of set up that strategy as a manager to be able to help both parties? Because there is definitely teams that have all of these from different spectrums, right? And you want to be able to cater to everyone. You don't want to play favorites either, but you know, there's a little give and take there.
It's a great question, and that's something that I think is valid from if you look at it. Like if you look at the highest performer, I guess it's what are they doing well and really understanding, hey, what is it truthfully that you do need help or improvement on? And I think it's understanding, does that individual that might be high performing, like are we meeting just to meet? Are we meeting just to catch up? Is there a reason behind it? But also having an understanding of like, I flat out want to understand like, you know, where that person is within their kind of journey or career within that moment and what's going well and what's not going well and what can I help out with? I think my meetings are a lot of time like, hey, we have an hour here. Like I want to listen to you and I want to focus on what's really most important for you to get out of this. Now, if you're exhausting more energy in that person that might be underperforming and taking away from those that are overachieving in a way, that's a going back and forth, and you kind of got to analyze and identify like, is it a gap on my part, right? So we all have one-on-ones with our teams, right? You know, we have that time. But that's a very good question. And I
sorry for the hard questions, Johnny.
The short answer is like, hey, I'm going to spend time with the person who needs it, right? And if they're asking for help, if they want help, and there's that attitude, care, and effort,
sure,
let's give it to them. And I will go out of my way, right? And I will do whatever it takes. And I will be in the weeds with you. And then there's just people, and we've all had them, y'all, like people that are just really good. And sometimes it's not even that they need help. It's they need a little bit more of a push because they have so much more potential and they just don't know it's there. And that's the cool part.
Yeah.
And the follow-up question to your point, Ryan, when you talked about like expect kind of greatness in a way, like you got to be able to push that boundary, right? And it's not so much coming from a place where like we're trying to be like, hey, you're doing good, but you can do better. But like I hope and I would think all of you guys have had people in your lives that have pushed you and maybe weren't so much quote unquote your best friend. And you probably looked at him in a way where you're like, dude, what is wrong with like, am I gonna? And then in the end game, you're like, damn, now I see why that person did that because they saw the true potential.
Yeah.
But yeah, great question, James. Thanks for putting me on the spot with that one. I'll report back to you on that.
Well, John, before we go, I got one last question, easy question. If there's one word that you could give,
easy,
and none of us
we're big on one thing lately.
If there's one thing or one word that you could say is important for a leader or a manager to embody, what do you think that is? Whether it's a characteristic, a trait, anything.
I was going to give 3 words. I would say
3 words. I mean, come on. We did that in football, right?
No,
we
he's
came up
fine.
with the 1 word, and we came up with an acronym.
Yeah, we did. We did. That's so true.
I would say in the day, in the age of where we're living in, and just the people itself, I think one thing is very important is trust.
Great. I agree.
A few others, but like I'm gonna throw a little curveball and say trust.
I was thinking your word was empathy.
So I was gonna say that, but I'm not gonna say empathy because I said it earlier. I swear I was gonna say empathy, but I didn't want to say empathy, but I would say trust because I think if you develop trust, there's some empathy behind it, right? Yeah. Hey,
all right,
empathy, Gary V, baby.
All right.
All right, John.
We love it. Thank you.
I'm going to steal the floor. One last question. I promise it's the last one. This is for the fans out there. We need to know. We need to know. It's come up. Jonathan, are you AI generated? We need to know. The question has been asked. We are here today. Are you AI generated,
I'm a pretty shitty AI generated. There's a lot of better things that I could have created than me. I'll tell you that.
Don't sell yourself short there, John. Don't sell yourself short.
He's AI generated.
I thought AI was supposed to be the best and greatest technology. I don't know. If this is what they're putting out, we got a long road ahead of us, boys. Oh, my God.
Oh, man. That's good. That's good.
Well, thank you for shedding light on your voyage and on your ascension towards where you are today. And we have all personally seen you grow and change drastically from the day that we've met you to today. And
perfect.
We appreciate everything that you teach us and help us understand as a leader because, like all of us, you know, you embody a lot of really important characteristics as a friend, and we trust you. We trust you a lot.
Trust. There you go.
Trust.
Love that. Thanks, gents. I appreciate the time. Thanks for drilling me with some questions. I was hoping there was one question you guys didn't ask me, and you guys didn't. Time management, because I got no.
Yeah.
That'll be a separate episode.
I was waiting for that one to come up, and I was like, let's just go ahead.
James might take that one. I think he's good at that one. James, you can take that one. Awesome. No. Well, until then.
And there continues.